HowlSage, Sages of Darkness, Book 1. Written by Brock Eastman. Narrated by J.J. Battiston. Chapter 6, October 6th, Friday. An ether pit opened in a Chilean mine, McGarrett said. A dozen miners are trapped in the mine after a section collapsed. That's the fifth new gateway in as many months, said Mr. Swigert. Our society, known as the Legion der Dämonjäger, was founded to stand guard, destroy demons, and rescue humans in danger. As you know, the society is spread thin. In the past, new ether pits opened a few times a century at most. With new ether pits opening so rapidly, the society can't recruit or train new hunters and support teams quickly enough, McGarrett explained. Olsen or I will likely be sent to Chile to lead the rescue of the miners, get things under control, and establish an outpost, McGarrett said. The society ran a disaster recovery and relief company as a cover for our involvement in these types of situations. McGarrett and Mr. Swigert were two of the most experienced veterans in the organization, and having both in the same place was a luxury. Then again, a regional headquarters should have a staff of 20. We were a staff of 6. McGarrett, Mrs. Riley, Mr. and Mrs. Swigert, Ike, and me. It had been 7. With a HowlSage loose in Ashley Meadows and Taylor not fully trained, there's a chance neither of us will get sent, McGarrett said. The decision is up to the Legion der Dämonjäger Leadership Council. We'll know in a couple of hours. When the ether pit outside Ashley Meadows opened in 1859, people were willing to believe in demons then. The miners here struck into a black, bottomless pit, and when townspeople started seeing ghosts and unexplainable appearances began to occur, they became suspicious. A local minister contacted the society and a team sent in. Even after the ghost sightings ceased, the miners refused to go back into the mines, and the company went bankrupt. Soon after the mines were abandoned, and through the society's efforts, the federal government purchased the encompassing mountains and turned them into a national forest and animal preserve. McGarrett examined my ankle while Ike and his dad looked over the J-pack. I assumed McGarrett told Mr. Swigert what I had mentioned about the tweaking. You'd think I would have been in trouble, but Mr. Swigert believed there were many failures for each success. He always quoted Thomas Edison. I have not failed. I've found 10,000 ways that won't work. Or something like that. The problem with this theory is it was my life on the line. My body was testing these gadgets and gizmos. Thankfully, I'd not experienced a severe injury. Of course, I'd only been on the job a few days, so at that rate, I should be dead by the end of next week. Well, this should help. McGarrett wrapped my ankle tightly. He gave me an old crutch he had pulled from storage. Take it easy at school. After breakfast, Ike and I rode the bus to school. The empty bus arrived shortly after we reached the gate. We were the first stop, as we were the farthest from town, so we grabbed our usual seats in the back. As we wound down the road, my eyes stayed glued on the woods. HowlSage didn't come out in daylight, but 4 days into the hunt, there were sure to be other minor demons sneaking through the ether pit. Kids of all ages boarded the bus on the descent down the mountainside. There was one school in Ashley Meadows, and it handled kindergarten through high school. The halls were full as Ike and I walked in. Since I was struggling with the crutches, Ike carried my backpack to my locker and then rushed off to the science lab. Ike had been waiting to ask Mr. Bill about some chemical compounds since last night's successful test of the neutralizing agent I had used on the green flames. The school day was uneventful. I barely passed a math pop quiz, but aced my history paper. Last night's events ran through my mind, encountering the HowlSage, the mess of vehicles downtown, my failure to find the demon, and my jetpack malfunction. I needed to do better. There was no sign of the new girl in class, or anywhere for that matter. I realized how few kids at school I knew when I described the girl to some kids and asked if they'd seen her. All said no. I should have been more social, but I was still a new kid myself. I'd only been in Ashley Meadows since June. I tried remembering a saying my dad often quoted, something about friends and outside. Outside the school, Ike tugged on my shoulder. Looks like somebody's off to Chile. McGarrett was driving with Mr. Swigert in the back. McGarrett motioned me into the passenger seat, and Ike got into the back seat with his dad, a sign that it'd be Mr. Swigert heading to South America. Ike and I loaded into the back seat. My heart skipped a beat. There she was, the girl. I almost got out of the car, but what was I going to say? Hey, my name is Taylor, and I was watching you from a rooftop the other night. That wouldn't sound creepy at all. As we pulled away, she walked to a pink moped and put on an equally pink helmet. The roles turned, and I lost sight of her. We pulled into the parking lot of Ashley Meadows Regional Airport. It was small, with a few private jets and one airline. Ike hugged his dad and stood next to me while McGarrett and Mr. Swigert spoke. As usual, their conversation was intense, with stern expressions and hand gestures. Mr. Swigert waved goodbye and headed through security, which we knew from the overhead announcements was threat level orange. It's never going to be green, I said. Probably not, Ike agreed. I scoffed. Imagine if instead of a terror alert level, there was a spiritual warfare alert level, Ike said. People would ignore it like they do the terror alert level in airports. And on cue, the announcement aired again. No passengers stopped to listen. They went about their business as if the warning was nothing more than an advertisement for Easy Cheese. Ike and I followed McGarrett to the car. What you said is true. We all have access to the book, yet most choose not to heed its instruction and warnings, Ike said. It was a fair point, and it hit home. I was neglecting my reading. I forced a smile to hide my discomfort and shrugged off the guilty feeling. We rode back to the Pink Hippo, listening to the police scanner. But this evening, like most others, there was no activity. No messages from Chief Rutledge, McGarrett said with a glance at his phone. Tonight we are focusing on the town, not the mines. Back at the workshop, Ike launched the targeting application and the map of Ashley Meadows. The surrounding countryside appeared on an oversized display in the command center. Several bright spots in varying hues appeared. Small sensory devices scattered throughout the area picked up traces of scent, sound, infrared, and visual identification, attempting to match the likeness of our current mark. Samples like what I had collected last night helped fine-tune what the sensors looked for, which enabled us to detect the HowlSage and demon aura better. Well, that's not helpful, I said. McGarrett grinned. The sensors appear to be picking up every pet in Ashley Meadows. Of course, my first demon would be the most challenging type to track, having qualities so like animals, especially dogs. Yes, now they are. But last night, after Taylor returned, I cross-referenced the county's pet registry with our search area. Ike tapped the screen on his tablet, and more than 80% of the red disappeared. Wow, that's cool, I said. Ike smiled. McGarrett ruffled Ike's blonde hair. This is great. How'd you do it? It's only possible because the county's records recently went digital, which included all animal registrations. It's not perfect. Potentially the HowlSage could pass by sensors I eliminated due to their proximity to a pet owner, but at least we'll have a more targeted area to check in town. Indeed. Ike, you certainly take after your father. Too bad we lost him. Ike turned ghost white, and McGarrett realized his misstep. I mean, we lost him to Chile for a few weeks. Oh, right. Ike said. It looks like we still have a resident genius, though, McGarrett said. Huh, McGarrett didn't spiral through a willow tree with a rocket strapped to his back. I pointed at the map. Looks like there are still hotspots near the mines, one near the old canning factory, both to be expected, but this one south of the airport is interesting. The red hues glowed, pulsing like they were alive. The red spots weren't, but the thing we were tracking, the beast that made the screen glow crimson. How's the ankle? McGarrett asked, taking a seat. Feels fine. In truth, it was tender. I relied heavily on the crutch all day. Since I didn't know a whole lot of people at school, no one had bothered to ask how I'd hurt myself. You sure? McGarrett asked, as if seeing through my lie. I forced a smile. With that, the three of us headed to dinner. I leaned less on my crutch as we crossed to the Pink Hippo. A frigid breeze scattered leaves across the cobblestone rotunda. The smell of dinner engulfed us as the door to the inn opened. My mouth watered and my stomach growled. We feasted on fall-apart pot roast, brown-sugared carrots, roasted potatoes, and freshly made loaves of Mrs. Riley's melt-in-your-mouth wheat bread covered in butter and raspberry jam. I was so full. All I wanted to do was slink to my bed or find a couch and curl up to sleep. But alas, McGarrett reminded me, of course, waiting until we left the dinner table, it was time to gear up. The sun was setting, and the waning moon would soon dominate the sky. Ike disappeared into the kitchen while Mrs. Riley gathered dishes. I went to my room and grabbed a black dry-fit shirt, jacket, and pants. I laced up my sneakers, and I was off. McGarrett accessed video from the traffic and security cams around town, trying to get a glimpse of the demon. Chief Rutledge secured the feeds a couple of months ago for us. Ashley Meadows didn't have surveillance in the past, but thanks to a government, anti-terror grant funds were available. Find anything? I asked, stretching my shoulders. Nope, but with Ike's work, we've eliminated most of the locations. He looked at his watch. I think the first place we try is the old canning factory. Why? It has the highest reading of elements we're targeting. But isn't its den most likely in the mines? Yes, but there are too many exits from there. It keeps getting past us. The canning factory appears to be a good starting point tonight. But I could go into the mines and look, and if I found its den and waited for it to return, then no, Taylor. We focus on the canning factory, McGarrett said. He didn't want me to go into the mines because of what had happened to my dad. We still didn't know who the cloak was, and clearly there were HowlSage in the mines. I didn't argue. He was right. We should get going, he said. I gathered my essential gadgets into my pack, including a restock of smoke grenades. The J-pack waited ominously on a set of hooks. I swallowed hard. It was my quickest form of transport. The door flew open as Ike tore in. He was out of breath, and there was blood everywhere. Blood smeared on his shirt, blood splattered across his hands. Ike? I dropped my pack and started for him. He held up 3 water balloons filled with red liquid. He wasn't hurt. He, invented something, I guess. Ike beelined to me, holding out his hand with a proud smile across his face. This is chicken blood. I looked at him with disgust. And? I drained it from tomorrow's dinner. Mrs. Riley had already killed the chickens. While fresh meat was the best, and there was no comparison to Mrs. Riley's fried chicken, the grim aspect of killing the chickens remained. I'd never slaughtered one myself, but I was out back when a chicken escaped from Mrs. Riley. I understood running around like a chicken with its head cut off firsthand. What are they? Blood bombs. The name's not all that creative. That's disgusting. I'm not carrying a blood bomb. What happens if that stuff gets all over me? I crinkled my nose. Ike jiggled one of the bombs. I filled heavy latex balloons with blood. If you find yourself out of options, throw one of these at the HowlSage. It should briefly overwhelm its sense of smell, igniting its hunger. I'd rather not ignite its hunger. Ike shook his head. While it's lapping up the blood, you'll get the few seconds you need to escape. Ike handed me the bombs. Thanks, I said, still not sure they were a great idea. The balloons fit inside a small pouch I tied to my belt. McGarrett turned and stared at Ike, an eyebrow raised in curiosity. I see you're breathing, and that's what matters, so I won't ask. Can you help me get the J-pack outside? Your dad modified it while you were at school. By modified, McGarrett meant fixed it back to its original state. A working state, I hoped. I hobbled after them. My ankle felt worse than this morning. I pictured the HowlSage hunched over, its fangs bared, and bright yellow eyes staring me down. A twinge of fear hit. I shook my head and clenched my fists. What's wrong? Asked McGarrett. Nothing, but the lie twisted in my mind. Ike looked over the J-pack. We're losing time, McGarrett warned. Let's get going. McGarrett lifted the J-pack onto my back, releasing its weight. My ankle buckled, and I tumbled backward. A searing pain shot up my leg, and I jerked in agony. The jetpack straps held me down like a turtle upside down on his shell. McGarrett shook his head as he and Ike freed me. This is going to be a setback. You can't go out on that ankle. His tone was accusatory, acknowledging the lie I'd been telling. Ike pulled me to my feet. I winced, then felt liquid running down my leg. I looked and saw blood. Looks like the contraption cut you as well. McGarrett shook his head. He was frustrated, but tried to act like he was more concerned about my injuries. Have Mrs. Riley look at that. Ike began to laugh. It's not funny. Taylor's hurt. We've 25 days left to stop the HowlSage before it has lethal venom. Have you forgotten the creature's purpose? It will summon demons and take hold of this town. It will gather an army by the full moon, and then we'll be hard-pressed to stop even a quarter of the demons from escaping into the countryside, McGarrett scolded. Not to mention, it will be out for blood. It won't be satisfied with wild animals and pets. It will want to turn humans into werewolves, and at some point, it will want to feed on a human." McGarrett looked away. He looked up at the moon. His heavy breaths were the only sound. "I'm sorry." Ike pulled the pouch away from my belt. He opened it and showed it to us. Chicken blood soaked my shirt, my pants. "One of the bombs I made for Taylor," Ike whispered apologetically. McGarrett frowned. "Get inside and have Mrs. Riley look at your ankle. I'm going to call Chief Rutledge. Let's hope since the demon is only a few days old and knows there's a hunter, it's not feeling adventurous again tonight." After seeing the HowlSage's reaction to me last night, that look and smiling expression gave me doubt in McGarrett's hope. Ike helped me across the driveway and up the grand front staircase of the Pink Hippo. In the quiet lobby, I stopped and took off my blood-soaked shoes, socks, and pants. Dripping chicken blood all over the rugs would have been a surefire way of getting in trouble. "I'll meet you in the library," I told Ike. He nodded, but his expression was gloomy. "Ike, don't worry. I'll get the HowlSage. It's not your fault I got hurt." "But he's right. We can't let the HowlSage live to the full moon. And it'll be free to siphon sin tonight." What Ike said was accurate, but it was worse than that. McGarrett had told me, "Every day the HowlSage is here, more minor demons will enter Ashley Meadows." A HowlSage's tactical purpose was to act as the leader of a battalion of demons. The HowlSage was the strong man, guarding the ether pit and allowing smaller demons to come through safely. It served as a shield against hunters and angels. That was what occupied a lot of McGarrett and Jesse's daytime activities. "I know, but I'll get it. We have time." I meant my words to reassure Ike, though having seen the HowlSage face to face, I wasn't convinced myself. "It's getting stronger." "I know." He looked away. "See you in a bit." Ike headed for the library, and I went to my room. I changed my clothes and found Mrs. Riley waiting by the fireplace in the lobby. I rolled up the bottom of my pant leg, revealing my purple-blue ankle. A clucking noise accompanied her evaluation as she looked over the damage. "Well, dear, it's off to the infirmary with you. We need to put on some salve, a splint, and wrap it up." The second floor housed a medical ward with a dozen beds and scores of medical equipment, some once outdated, but updated by Mr. Swigert. His adjustments made the machines better than what existed in the local hospital. Mrs. Riley gathered supplies while I waited on a bed. I rolled my pant leg up in hopes of avoiding a drafty gown. She applied an acrid-smelling salve and rubbed it in less gently than I liked. My leg lurched involuntarily a couple of times, for which Mrs. Riley apologized. She assured me it was necessary to work the salve deep into my skin, thereby allowing it to seep into the tissue and muscle. "This should have been done last night," she declared. "Why didn't I know about this?" A clear accusation. She placed the splint on each side of my ankle and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. It looked like I had put my foot through the middle of a grapefruit. Walking would be a quest. I put my weight on my injured ankle and didn't waver. The challenge would be not to bump the bandage ball against my other ankle. Without a doubt, Ike's favorite, and one of my least at the Pink Hippo, was the library. 2 stories of bound paper, as in books, surrounded the circular room. The ceiling reached higher than other floors as the library occupied only the lower 2 levels of a 10-story tower. A narrow set of stairs spiraled along the wall to a balcony at the top. There was a great view of Ashley Meadows from there. Most of the book collection was from the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. In other words, there were very few books I would read. Many of the books were written by members of the society, giving accounts of past hunts. I'd found a few books in the library intriguing, like Frankenstein, a thought-provoking story. Man tries to be God, but realizes man can't mimic God. Though labeled fiction, the book was based on a real account the society dealt with. There were other classics like Frankenstein that were considered fiction by the world, based on genuine terrors the society had once faced. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Wolfman, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Invisible Man, and Dracula were a few examples. Ike lounged in an overstuffed chair, one with a few bite marks from Riley's former dog, Gruff. A dozen open books covered the ground around his chair. He had skimmed them all while I was in the infirmary. Ike was like a machine when searching. "Ike!" I laughed when he jumped a few feet. "A little edgy, are we?" He shook his head. You would have startled too if you'd read what I did. Oh yeah? Let me look. I walked over and he handed me the book. It's the one I've been telling you about. It's an actual account written by a farmer in the 1800s. Oh really? I turned it over in my hand, half laughing that a book written in the 1800s could be frightening. I read the cover, The HowlSage Haunting. So? Read the subtitle. How the Hunter Became the Hunted. The hairs at the nape of my neck prickled at the scribbly, silver-embossed letters. Remember, I told you about the hunter in the story. He was a veteran of 20 years, he said. The journal entries aren't his. They're by this farmer, but the hunter shows up about midway through the account. Sure. Anything else? I asked, trying to clear the subtitle from my thoughts. Not much, but the HowlSage aren't all that common. The information we have on hunting is a bit dated compared to the technology we have now. They used silver swords like you are. We already knew that. Ike huffed. I'm trying. I flipped shut the HowlSage haunting. McGarrett said some of the HowlSage were already destroyed. Do you know how? Ike shook his head. Details are still coming in, but primarily swords. The hunters got the demons in their dens before they fully rose. You'd think they'd get us information quickly so we could use it. Even when we do, it won't be an easy one-step solution. There's a reason why this is called hunting. Don't I know that, I said with a sigh. Ike shrugged. Well, if they're so good, why doesn't one of them come here? My voice rose again. Ike had an answer. They've been dispatched to handle the HowlSage in that rose in areas without hunters. I know. There are only a dozen hunting teams worldwide. To make matters worse, several HowlSage are in remote areas feeding off the people in small villages. There's one down in Peru near Machu Picchu that's been particularly hard. It nearly killed the hunter after it. How? Rockslide. They can get those details to us, but not how to kill it? That came through the prayer line, Ike said, as if that was more important. I'm going to my room. I've got homework. It was time to be alone before I said something I couldn't take back. I shouldn't be frustrated with Ike. It wasn't his fault.